Folks, so we are starting a kind of a new topic today. It's very, very short. It is roughly on page 137 of your notes book. You are essentially looking for this table, and if we were in school, we'd be doing it as a jigsaw where you'd each have to go off and find a little piece of information, and then you'd come back and you would share it all together. So for that reason, the slides don't quite follow the sequence of the table, so I'll be telling you where to fill in as we go through. This topic is linked to our next few topics that come with it. So this is kind of like the basis for the reason your kidneys do what they do and for why your lungs do what they do. Could be a song. So this word, homeostasis, it is really important for us because if this starts to go wrong, then we will get not sick, but our body will start to shut down. So first thing that we have to understand are some words that go with homeostasis. So we're starting now in the first row of our table, and this is the idea of an external environment. So this is the surroundings in which an organism lives in. So this is us. In winter when we're outside, it's cold. In summer when we're outside, it's hot. That is our external environment. Now, most organisms, including ourselves, we can't control our external environment. So that can have huge implications for what goes on inside us. And as we said, ours is the air around us, but if you're an amoeba, which we've just did in our last topic, then their external environment is the water in which they live in. But this is the external environment is the part that I want you to get your head around to begin with. So if you have an external environment, you have an internal environment. And realistically, we're talking about cells now. So we are multicellular organisms, and what is around each of our cells is our internal environment. So for us as animals, we have tissue fluid, it is called, and it surrounds every cell in our body. And we can really control our internal environment. So what's going on in terms of temperature, in terms of pH, in terms of salt concentration, we are really, really good at controlling our internal environment. Some organisms, such as snakes and other reptiles, cold-blooded, they're not so good at controlling their internal environment, and we'll talk about them when we go on to skin and the senses. So we've had external environment and internal environment from the top row. Which brings us to what homeostasis is. Now this is the SEC definition, so if they ask you for a definition of homeostasis, you have to vomit this up at them. So it is the ability of an organism to maintain a constant internal environment. So realistically, we don't want our body temperature changing, we don't want the pH of our blood changing, we need to have a certain amount of glucose going around in our blood, and our ability to do that is called homeostasis. So that again is in the top row. Now for humans, what are the things that are really important for us? So this is going to finish the top row. We need to stay at 37 degrees. So if we were all together, I'd be asking you, why is 37 degrees important? And we need this temperature for our enzymes to work at their best. The pH of our blood and the tissue fluid that surrounds our cells, that needs to stay around 7.4. If it goes too high or too low, it can have consequences for our enzymes. They won't work as well. And we need to have a certain concentration of oxygen in our blood. So if you've been keeping an eye on COVID, one of the things that is a giveaway that people are struggling is when the oxygen concentration of their blood goes down below, I think, 94, 95. But we need a certain amount of oxygen and we need a certain amount of glucose in our blood. They have to be constant. So these are the factors. So this should be a constant. So these are what, in terms of homeostasis, are important to us. So we should have by now finished our top row. So why is homeostasis necessary? So primarily for this thing called osmoregulation, and you might now have an idea what this part of the word means because we've done it in our last topic. And realistically, homeostasis helps us work at our best rate and independent of our external environment. So we're on to our second row now, first cell. Now, there is no box, I've noticed, for osmoregulation. So at the bottom of the page under the table, you should be able to write a sentence for osmoregulation. So osmoregulation has to do with osmosis, And osmosis is the movement of water, we've said, from high concentration to low concentration across semi-permeable membrane. So what osmoregulation does for us is it maintains the salt-water balance in our fluids and in the cells in our body. So it makes sure that our cells aren't losing loads of water, or that there's not too much water going in so that they might burst, because otherwise we'd be in trouble. So again, this is an SEC definition, and if they ask it for you, you need to be able to vomit it back up. So we move along. So the top of the next page, there is a header that says the homeostasis processes that have to be controlled in humans. So just in order of osmoregulation, we have to maintain a body temperature of 37 degrees. Doesn't matter what's going outside. And again, this is for our enzymes. We've said we have to maintain the pH of your blood and tissue fluid. We have to maintain sufficient oxygen. We have to maintain glucose in our blood plasma. And something we haven't talked about so far is we have to prevent buildup of toxic chemicals in our bodies. So our kidneys help us out in that way. Our skin helps us out in that way. And our lungs help us out in that way. So this is going in my book on the top of page 138. Now, in terms of diffusion homeostasis, well, in reality, it depends on the type of organism, first and foremost. So are you a single-celled amoeba or bacteria, or are you us, multicellular? So it really does depend on what materials and what type of organism we are. So now we're in the second row and second cell. And again, we've just done diffusion. So spreading out of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low along a concentration gradient. So if we had sprayed our smelly deodorant, it would be really strong here, but it'll get eventually over to somebody standing here. She's looking lovely, smiley face, because of diffusion. So the organs and organ systems involved for us is we have our skin, which helps control our body temperature. We have our kidneys, which controls the tissue fluid pH. And we have our liver, and our kidneys will reduce buildup of toxins for us. And then in terms of our brain, well, that's the coordination system for the whole thing. So it needs up-to-date information to be able to decide what it should do. So do you need to cool down? Is there too much toxins? Do they need to be broken down? So that's where your brain kind of coordinates and puts it all together. Now we are going to skip to the last, this is the bottom row, second last cell from the right. So for us, we have gases, nutrients and toxic wastes are exchanged between our cells and our external environment. But how good we are at doing it and how efficient we are at doing it depends on the amount of material that needs to be exchanged and the surface area available for diffusion. Now, again, for us, our lungs, our skin, they both have large surface areas, so they're really good at diffusion. But if you're a little flat organism, well, actually, they're going to be really good too, because the distance that they have to diffuse through is really, really small. So this is, again, still on our bottom row. So just to focus in on, so on the third row, the role of our skin now, it gets rid of salt and water from our skin, from our bodies in the form of sweat. And our lungs, they firstly have a large surface area and they do gas exchange. So oxygen into blood and carbon dioxide out. So that is the beginning of row 3 up for role of skin and end of row 3 for role of lungs. Our circulatory system then is a transport system, so it's going to remove all these gases and get them to their exit points. Similarly with the toxic wastes, it's going to break them down in your liver, and it's going to then get it to your kidneys so you can remove it in your urine. So that is the role of our circulatory system. So this is in the bottom row now. And I think we have covered everything. Let me see, we've done this. So the only one is possibly at the end of row 4, where it says single-celled organism. How do they do exchange? And they are going to do it via diffusion. Now I think we have covered everything that is in here. So there is a video, link attached to this. It says Introduction to Homeostasis. So if you want to watch that, that will give you some insight. There is also a QR code in your book. So there's a link in the assignment and there's a QR code if you'd want to have a look at it. The QR code may go above what we need as an introduction. On page 138, you have some questions. We can't do them all because as I said, homeostasis is just an introduction to the topic, but there is, the crossword on page 140 in my book that you can have a go at. So take photos of your work, put them onto the class notebook page, and I am on Zoom right now if you have any questions.